Hello, I'm Jacob Morris, a freelance vision mixer and a Sony switcher demonstrator. This is the first of a series of videos looking in detail at the new MLS-X1 modular live production switcher from Sony. In this first video, I'd like to give you an overview of the MLS-X1 and also the ICP-X7000 panel and talk you through the setup that we're going to be using today. So firstly, let's talk about the control panel, which is in front of me. This one is the fully modular ICP-X7000 range, which is exactly the same panel used with our previous XVS line of switchers. This is a 3ME 20 crosspoint button panel, but you can order it in any configuration between 1 and 4 ME rows and a choice of 20, 28 or 36 crosspoint button models to suit your control room space. In addition, there's 4 compact one-piece panels available in 1 or 2 ME buses and 16 or 24 crosspoint button models. Now the panel can be broken down into several distinct elements, starting with the crosspoint module, which will be on the left-hand side. That's everything left of this line just here. What we have here is 2 rows of smaller buttons, traditionally used for key control, and 2 rows of larger buttons, traditionally your A and B bus. I say traditionally because with the MLS-X1 we can change the function of all of these, and we'll go into that a little bit later on. But for now, this is key selection over here, and this is program selection and preview selection per ME. You can see straight away I've got tally indication as I cut around on program, and you'll see if I did the same on a different bus that isn't cut to air, we have a lower yellow tally instead of the on-air red tally, the same as we get on our preview bus. I can also start altering key sources, which work in exactly the same way, and when I turn the key on, we get a high red tally. The source name displays are on this OLED display here, and the user colour that we set in the menu is displayed both on the button and the indicator light just below the screen, just there. I can use the crosspoint pad in its default arrangement to change which key I'm controlling on this top row. I'm now moving key 3, and when I turn key 3 on, we get that red tally. And if I go back to key 1, that tally's gone, and we're back to key 1. So we've got lots of control options here just on the crosspoint row. The next module we'll talk about is the next transition area and key control. This is where we have our traditional T-bar for executing mixed transitions, and it's also where we can source our next transition. By default, we're on background, but I've got options for key 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6, 7, and 8 for those 8 key program MEs you might be running. I've also got options to select between different transition types, such as a non-additive mix or preset color mix, which allows you to go through a color in between your 2 sources. We can also do wipes and clip transitions, but we'll go through that later on. On the other side of the T-bar, we have our individual key controls. We have hard on-off buttons for our bug, you can see on screen there, and we can also auto-transition that on or off. As with any other switcher, I can delegate 2 layers together and transition them together in the transition area. Over on the key control area, I've got a little bit of extra information relating to my keys. So if we take a look at key 8 just here, you can see there's a little RZ mark in the corner that indicates that that key has a resizer applied to it. It's also sourced with frame memory 15, which is there, and it's got a tally because it's on air. The M indicates that a mixed transition is applied to the individual key transition, and the 10 indicates that is a 10 frame mix. Next up is the FlexiPad, and you get one of those on each of your ME rows. The FlexiPad is, exactly like the name describes, a flexible area to mainly control macros, snapshots, but also some other functions of the panel. Its default configuration is shown here, though this is completely software adjustable in the menu. Sony also supply you some labels to change things like bank numbers or button labels. Starting from the bottom, we have macros. This is where you can save and recall macros. We'll go into macros in a little bit more detail, but recording one is as simple as holding the macro button and hitting the register you'd like to record, and we're in red record mode. And as I punch around, you'll see the event number ticking up, and I can store that just like that. Running it would be as simple as hitting it. We can also do the same with shot boxes and panel memories, which we'll go into later, as well as snapshots on your ME and key and wipe snapshots too. All of that can be driven from the FlexiPad. I've got bank control here to jump between different banks of macros and snapshots. which is nice and easily at my fingertips, and I can even go to the bank selector and type in a particular bank to jump straight there instantly. I even get transition rate control on this button, which will allow me to quickly change my auto transition number to a different speed, which is indicated just here on the next transition module. Next up, I'll walk you through the 4 additional modules available. These are optional when you order a panel, but they are all very useful and have different use cases. This is the 10 keypad module, and it's mostly used as a kind of master area to save and recall things. For example, we can put it into macro mode, and we can store a macro on a particular number, or we can recall that macro again. We can put it in snapshot mode, and with the region select area here, I could store snapshot 10 on ME1. I get a nice E to show me it's empty, and I can recall it as well there. It's a nice area to use, and it's a good way when you're building your show to recall lots of effects at once, because I can also multi-select regions and recall multiple things in multiple regions. I can also do effect timelines and shot boxes there too. Above that on our panel, we have the trackball module. When you spec your panel, you can choose where these modules go. This is just our demonstration layout and is often something we commonly find when people order. The trackball module has quite a few functions, and I'll walk you through some of those now. First of all, the trackball is great for working a resizer. So if we went to ME2 in this case, where I have some boxes, key one's there, and I can move and manipulate that box by spinning the outside ring for the Z-axis, and I can use the trackball to move a source round, just like that. I can individually control one axis with these X, Y, Z buttons by turning on only one, and now I can only control the X axis, even if I'm going up and down or spinning the outer ring. It's a really easy way to make fine adjustments. A really nice feature is I can multi-select 2 keys and adjust them together in sync to move 2 boxes at the same time. Next up, we can also control devices with the device button, and that includes internal frame memories. So we have our MLS wipe loaded on frame memory 1, and if I put it into jog mode, I can actually jog around on the frame memory, frame by frame, and have a good look at it. So if I was checking which frame number I needed to do a transition on, for example, I can jog through and see that the current frame is frame 12, and that's where it covers the full image. I can do that to select something, to grab something, lots of reasons I might need to do that, and I've also got full rewind and play control to control that as required. I can also hit the menu button, and that will allow me to control the menu, which is over here and we'll come on to in just a moment. But for example, if I wanted to dial in those values, as I'm moving the trackball, you can see that the clip and gain values are being represented on screen. Next up, we have the utility shotbox module, which is another multi-purpose area and can be quite useful for larger productions. Its first function is to control effect timeline editing, which we won't go into too much, but that's what the keyframe macro edit button does, and you get a representation of the buttons and functions you might need to edit a timeline. You also get a large amount of user programmable banks on which you can place macros, shot boxes, or even menu shortcuts, which is a really useful use for this area. For example, if I want to jump to my macro menu, I've made a couple of shortcuts, I hit the macro button and the menu jumps to the number that I've recorded, or my frame memory menu. This is a really handy use of this space as a way to quickly jump to menus you might need on air, but it can also be used as a kind of giant macro flexipad to place all different show functions, loads, buttons, anything you might need to do in the show somewhere within easy reach, under different banks to help categorize them. We can also, of course, run effect timelines from here and change them into reverse and forward actions. Finally, we can control transition rates at the top here. You can see a representation of the different banks on the switcher, such as ME2, and when I tap into them, the 10 key region down here lights up and I can type in a new transition time, which will be reflected there. I can also do that individually per key and change the transition time on each key on an ME. Just like that. Finally, at the top of our demonstration panel is the key control module. This is mostly used for controlling keys, but has a few other useful functions as well. At the top here, we have our different MEs. So if I go to ME1, we've then got our keys listed underneath. I can select those, and then the panel will offer me a selection of properties, such as changing it from a lunar key to a linear key or a chroma key. I can also turn the resizer on and off here. So if I go to linear key, I've actually got the linear key properties down on the right-hand side here, and I can make tweaks to those straight from the panel. I can also put it in menu control mode, like that. At this point, the encoders on the right will represent the right-hand side of the menu panel, which in this case is a resizer menu. And you'll see X, Y, and size are there. And as I tweak them, the software GUI will represent those changes. Another useful feature is the auto delegate function. And when I've got that turned off in ME mode, as I delegate keys, you'll see that the selected key changes depending on what's delegated. And that works across all MEs as it switches to ME1, ME2, and program, and easily offers me the controls of the key that I've just delegated in a transition. One extra handy feature on this module is the show key function. Now if I turn key 1 on program, you'll see we've got a box in the corner. If I press the show key button with program preview key 1 selected, you'll see that on my preview I now see a representation of the key signal there, which is the white box in the top right corner. You can set an auto clear time for that in the menu, or you can toggle it on or off. That's particularly useful for chroma keys and just seeing how well you're handling edges and hairlines, but in this case I can show you that that's the key signal for that box. The real difference between this series and the XVS series is that we no longer have the Sony physical menu panel. Instead, it's a web-based GUI. But don't worry, the operation is very, very similar to previous generations. It just now means you can use it on any device with a web browser. The menu here is on a Windows touchscreen device, but you could use a keyboard and mouse to control it if required, and you could also use it on a tablet or any other device. Although the navigation has been made a bit more simple than previous generation Sony switchers, the main operational menus are exactly the same and will feel familiar, such as the key control menu, which will look very similar to previous generation MVS and XVS switcher users. You can control the key in exactly the same way. You have key bus control, and you can click in and operate menus in exactly the same way you would have done on the XVS switcher. The menu is still linked to the panel in the same way, which means I can double press something to jump to the right menu, and that works right across the desk for key delegates, for macros, snapshots, or anything like that. That all operates in exactly the same way, and that's achieved with a menu link, which is indicated by this chain link in the top corner. It's worth noting if you have more than one menu at a time will link to the switcher, and that means you could have a second page open of the menu in a different tab on your machine or a different device entirely. There's also a favourites bar, which sits at the bottom of the screen just here. There's a few other functions on the bottom row, but we'll talk about favourites to start with. And for example, we favorited the import menu for importing content, or the logical VK pair menu. Those are instant shortcuts that you can build and add as your program requires. To add a new menu to the favourites menu, you navigate to the menu you're looking for, such as table button assign, and you hit the heart button, and you'll see it's instantly added it on the bottom row for me. For these videos, we have a demonstration set up in front of me. We've got two assignable monitors. On the left, it's program, and a multi-viewer on the right to show you some frame memories and other sources, including the internal clip players. The multi-viewer inside the MLS-X1 has up to 4 independent outputs available, each with a choice of patterns and up to 16 tiles each. You can see one of those layouts here. We can also turn on clock and audio bar graphs. To do so, we go into the Setup menu, Switcher, and Multi-Viewer. We're using Multi-View 1 today, and you can see the 4 of them are available across the top. For example, I can enable borders or disable them. I can enable all names and disable them. On the individual channels, I can click into them and choose a source. Or I could go to a particular tile and turn it into a clock, of which we have an analog option or a digital option, depending on what you prefer. I also have an option in the multi-viewer menu to turn on audio level meters for sources. So clip 2, which has some audio, has had the audio meters turned on, and you'll now see if you look at our stack, you're getting VU meters for the audio on that clip. That will also work for incoming sources as well. For these videos, we're using a single MLS-X1 processor in SDI mode that's providing 64 inputs and 32 outputs. The system can be expanded though to provide a central processing resource of up to 5 MLS-X1s, which can be dynamically divided into up to 4 logical switches in either SDI or IP2110 interfacing for HD, UHD or mixed production formats. I'm not going to cover all of the system configuration possibilities here, so if you're looking for a little bit more information on that, please speak with your local Sony representative or have a look at the website. In the other videos in this series, I'll show you how to get the most out of your MLS-X1 switcher and cover the basics you need to get started.